Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookish Room and I'm back with another video. So something different that I wanted to do so you guys can finally see, because I haven't done it yet and I think it's about time that I've done it. But here's the baby bump. It is getting big. I am about to enter my third trimester. So we are reaching the final stretch and I'm super excited and super nervous because this is my first, and like you guys know, of course, already, like, this is my first. I'm a single mom, but I'm super duper, like, super excited to finally get to meet her. She's super active now. I mean, constantly kicking me all the time. And it's great because that is like a way for us to have conversation, which I absolutely enjoy and love. So anyway, this video is actually going to be a review. I haven't done a review in such a long time. And this is going to be a review of The Duff by Cody Keplinger. This is the first it's the first book that she's written, and it's not the first in a series, but all of her books, I'm not mistaken. I don't know about the last two that she's published because I haven't written them, but I do know that The Duff, Shut Out, Lying Out Loud, and A Midsummer's Nightmare all take place in the same town. So they're all connected in the same world, and the characters are somewhat connected in some way, and they make appearances in each other's books. So I wouldn't say like even a series, but they do take place in the same world. So I would recommend reading them by publication order so you kind of get the fullest enjoyment out of them. The first thing that I want to say about The Duff is that I read this book in 2014, so that's 5 years ago. I was younger than I am now, and I originally gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I reread this book this past week and I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. So that is a true testament to the fact that things change. How you feel about books, your perspective about books can change as you get older, as you have more life experiences. It's interesting to go back and see that you were in a different place when you were reading a book, and then now you're maybe older, or you may have experienced some things and you're just kind of like, this doesn't hit home the same way. So the basis for this book, The Duff, is that it is about a girl by the name of Bianca Piper. Bianca goes to high school. It takes place during her senior year of high school. She has 2 best friends, and she kind of doesn't enjoy going out with her friends. And I'll get into what issues I had with Bianca as a character. So she doesn't like to go out with her best friends a lot. She actually is a very cynical individual. She doesn't enjoy the traditional things that I think a lot of us would characterize as typical high school enjoyment. She's not into it at all whatsoever, just not her thing. But she ends up going to this teen club, and while she's sitting down having a Coke, this guy by the name of Wesley Rush comes up to her and tells her, hey, by the way, you're the designated ugly fat friend, which is the Duff, because it doesn't mean that you're not attractive, but you're the individual in your group of friends that is the least attractive, that makes your friends look better. So she gets super, super pissed at this, and then they end up going back and forth about what it means to be a Duff, and it of course lingers with her and it bothers her, and she does not get over it. So I'm going to go into some specific details of this book. If you don't want to be spoiled, I would just I wouldn't continue to watch this. I won't go into super deep plots, but some of the stuff that I will touch on the plot, and it may spoil some things. So I wouldn't recommend watching past this point. If you want just a quick idea of how I felt, I did not like this. I did not like Bianca. I thought the relationship between her and Wesley was extremely toxic. They use sex and other things to cope with their issues, which was problematic. Bianca has the lowest of the low self-esteems that I have seen in a lot of characters that I've read. and I just didn't enjoy it. And you can see these tabs are not for enjoyment. These tabs are for things that I found problematic. And the ones at the top are how many times Wesley calls her a duff throughout the book. So that is your non-spoiler insight to this book. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna jump into some things that I had problems with, and this may be a little bit longer because I actually wanted to refer to some parts of the text where I thought things were super, super problematic. So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the first things that I really noticed about this book is how low of a self-esteem Bianca has. And I characterize all of that by the blue tabs in the book, where I made a reference to everything that she had issues with. On page 1, literally on the first page of this text, there was a statement already that I didn't like, and I'm going to read it to you. And it says, every time we came to the nest, the same thing happened. Casey and Jessica danced, flirted, attracted the attention of every male in sight, and eventually were hauled out of the party by their protective best friend, me, before any of the horn dogs could take advantage of them. In the meantime, I sat at the bar all night talking to Joe, the 30-year-old bartender, about the problems with kids these days. She already is isolating herself from her friends. She already doesn't feel like she's on par with her friends. And this is even before Wesley even calls her a duff. So it's almost like Wesley calling her a duff reaffirms her feelings, because she already doesn't like herself. She already feels like she's different from her friends. She already feels like she's different from teenagers. She already feels like, you know, my friends like to come out and party. Meanwhile, like I'm gonna sit at the bar, drink cherry Coke, and that's kind of like my thing. And you can see how pretentious Bianca can be sometimes, and how she's very much, it's amazing to me, because it's almost like she's self-absorbed, but she doesn't have a good self-esteem. Like, she hates everything that teenagers, she's a teenager, but she hates everything that teenagers do, but she doesn't have a self-esteem. She thinks she's better than them, but then at the same time she doesn't. So even on page 2, she says, let's see, she says, I mean, seriously, where was all the fun in this? Want to dance to the same heavy bass techno music week after week? Sure. Then maybe I hit on this sweaty oversexed football player. And before that she says, my friends who could be somewhat sensible most of the time act like idiots, but in their defense, they weren't the only ones. Half of Hamilton High showed up on the weekends, and no one left the club with their dignity intact. I mean, most of these kids are 16, 17, 18 that are going to this thing. Like, they're supposed to be going out to enjoy themselves. This is not supposed to be a situation where they feel as though they should be super, super concerned about things. I don't know. It's just small things that Bianca says that just were not really appealing. Small things that even stuff such as, I considered the whole practice of school dances degrading, or that they were giant wastes of time and money. Like, people, I feel like in this book, and even me myself, didn't dislike Bianca because she wasn't as attractive as her friends. She just had a shitty personality, and that's why people didn't like her. And that's what the issues were. And then you come across Wesley. So while they're at this party, or at this teen club on this one specific night, she ends up meeting Wesley Rush. And Wesley is also a character that is super, super shallow. And I think Cody Keplinger tried to redeem him towards like the last 20 to 50 pages of the book. But he was such an asshole that it was kind of hard for his character to be redeemed. I mean, he basically says out, when he first meets up with Bianca, he says to her, think about it, why do they bring you here if you don't dance? The point is, scientists have proven that every group of friends has a weak link, a duff, and girls respond well to guys who associate with their duffs. So basically he was saying is that he wanted to hit on Bianca's friends, and the way that he was going to hit on Bianca's friends was to talk to her, because then her friends would feel like, oh, okay, well, you know, they're talking to her, so why is that such a big deal? That's super shallow. He's super shallow, and you find out why he's this way, but it just wasn't enough for me to even justify how awful of a person that he is. So the two of them interact. He calls her a duff. Bianca gets pissed. She throws a Coke at him, and then eventually they keep meeting up. There's one instance where they're sitting at the bar, and then he says something to her, and then Bianca just randomly kisses him, which threw me off. Like, she just throws herself at him, and it was just it was so awful. And I think it dealt with a lot of the fact that Bianca has a lot of issues going on in the background, where she has self-esteem issues, I think, pertaining to her mother not being present. So her mother is supposed to be this self-esteem guru. She wrote a book, she does all these talks, and her dad stays at home with her. Her mom hasn't been home in ages. It's clear as day that her mom has no intention on coming home anytime soon. She is kind of in her own world. She pretty much feels like her mom at some point is just going to leave her dad. And, you know, her dad is kind of delusional about it. He doesn't want to accept the fact that Bianca's mother doesn't want to have anything to do with him. So he kind of just, he doesn't, I'm gonna say he freaks out. He does freak out. He doesn't accept it, and he goes on a drinking binge, and he is a recovering alcoholic. So Bianca, being a senior in high school, doesn't handle that situation well. She ends up not telling anyone that her dad gets divorce papers from her mom, and then he ends up drinking himself, drinking his feelings away. He gets drunk. She comes downstairs one morning, and there's alcohol everywhere in the house, and he's passed out on the couch. And they don't talk about it. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't tell her mom. And it creates such an issue because after she ends up kissing Wesley, she ends up in this situation where they become friends with benefits. And it is, oh gosh, y'all, it is the most awkward thing. Okay, so by chapter 8 of this book, Bianca and Wesley have slept together. And Wesley makes a comment saying, "I'm never ashamed of anyone I sleep with. Sex is a natural chemical reaction." He said, "I just meant I'm shocked. I was honestly starting to believe you hated me." And she said, "I do hate you." And she does dislike him, but she starts to use sex as a coping mechanism. And it's super, super problematic because I don't think that that's ever fully addressed in this book. The fact that she does use sex as a way to cope with her issues. And she uses also self-deprecation to deal with the fact that she's using sex as a coping mechanism, which is awful. She's taking him down the hallway essentially so they can hook up in a closet. And she says, "Don't ask where I got this idea because I couldn't tell you, but I knew precisely where we were going. And I was sure that this might officially make me a slut." She calls herself a slut multiple times in this book because of the fact that she's having sex with Wesley. That's problematic in the sense that it was okay for Wesley to have sex with a lot of women, but when she had sex with this one guy, she felt like it made her the biggest slut in the world. And it was like, to me, I just feel like women should be able to enjoy that as much as men can, and she didn't, and she beat herself up about it, which was awful. And the whole time that this is happening, when she's using sex as a coping mechanism, when she is then going to self-deprecation for the fact that she's using sex as a coping mechanism, he continues to call her Duffy. As you can see at the top of this book, this is how many times Wesley calls her Duffy in this book. I had to mark it because I was like, how is that even okay that you're sleeping with her, and you're calling her Duff, and she's not really handling it too well. She's not saying anything about it. It was just awful. Then on top of that, Bianca lies to her friends throughout this entire book. She doesn't tell them that she's sleeping with Wesley because she doesn't want them to know. She doesn't want them to, I don't even know if it's even judgment, or she just doesn't feel like it's any of their business because she doesn't want her friends to know that her dad has slipped back into having drinking problems. But then she gets upset because she says stuff like, she doesn't understand why Casey, which is one of her best friends, is pissed at her. Well, I would be pissed at you too if you started avoiding me, you weren't talking to me, and then you weren't telling me what was going on. I know something's wrong. And then you expect me to act the same. Like, I felt like Bianca wanted people to do certain things, and she was not really reflective on her own behavior. A lot of times I feel like she was doing stuff like, I feel like she slut shamed a lot of people in this book. I feel like she body shamed people in this book. And she was well aware of her issues, but she never wanted to own up to her own issues. She would say stuff like, I needed that escape, that high more than ever, and he was always just a short drive away. A fix 3 or 4 times a week was all it took to keep me sane. So you realize that you have an issue, that you're sleeping with this guy because of the fact that it makes you feel better about yourself, or it makes you feel like you can deal with your situations because of the fact that you're sleeping with him. You realize that's a problem, but you still continue to judge everyone else around you. I don't like that. I hate that. I don't like that. And then the fact that that was used as a motivation for her to then catch feelings for him was just ridiculous. It wasn't realistic to have a father who's an alcoholic, that she never really dealt with his issues. He finally said, I'm going back to rehab, after he assaults her, straight hit her, calls her a slut and a whore. Wesley comes to the rescue to help her out. You know, he apologizes and cries, goes back to rehab. She continues to sleep with Wesley to deal with his issues, to deal with her issues. Wesley sleeping with her because he has issues with his parents never being present. And all of a sudden the two of them fall in love, and then it makes everything better. To me, I feel like that's not really a substantial way to deal with problems. And I don't think that should have been a way for them to deal with problems. It's like, oh, we don't like each other, we hate each other, but then we found out that we had feelings for each other and we're not that different because we've been having sex. Like, that to me it was absolutely mind-blowing. It was completely mind-blowing. And she still, even at 224 pages of this book, there was only 50 pages of this book left. Even at 224 pages of this book, she said, for sleeping with a guy, she said, did that make me a slut? The fact that we've only been dating for like 4 days and I was already rolling around him in a teeny tiny bed. This is with a different guy. Like, she doesn't feel comfortable about having sex. Like, she's not okay with it. So I don't understand how that's never dealt with. She slut shames herself. And and it takes her to 231 to stand up for herself to Wesley, because she says, then why do you call me that? Meaning the Duffy. I whispered, do you know how much it hurts every time you call the Duffy? Do you know how shitty it makes me feel? She's had this whole book to tell him, stop calling me the Duff, stop calling me the Duff. And he kept doing it. And to me, it was kind of like, he acted as if he had no idea that that would hurt her feelings. But you're calling someone a designated ugly fat friend, and you are going to respond by saying, Bianca, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. How do you not know that calling someone a designated ugly fat friend is going to make them feel bad? That is the stupidest shit like I have ever heard. I have never in my life heard of anything like that. And I think the best thing, and I'm just going through certain points in this book that I thought were just important to me. At one point, she finally says, calling Vicky a slut or whore was just like calling someone the Duff. It was insulting and hurtful, and it was one of those titles that just fed off of an inner fear every girl must have from time to time. Slut, bitch, prude, tease, ditz. They were all the same. Every girl felt like one of these sexist labels described to her at one point. That is the best thing that Bianca says this entire book. But then she goes to piss me off, because the next page, she goes and says, we were all sluts or bitches or prudes or dust. No, we're not. We're all human. Like, it's like as soon as I thought she learned something, it just made no sense. It took him to page 276 to give her an apology. And she says on 277, the last page, yeah, it was sick and twisted, but that's reality, right? Escape is impossible, so why not embrace it? So this book was it just was so problematic. Nothing was ever really handled the way it should have been handled. She clearly has problems. He clearly has problems. But it was like, sex is the vehicle that's going to fix all of our problems. And it was just super, super problematic. And I just could not get down with it. And I don't know why I didn't see it the first time I read it. I mean, it was 5 years ago. But, and I've been through a lot more, and I experienced a lot more since then. But super, super problematic. I had to give it 2 stars, y'all. And if you've read this book and you've seen, that's why people say, oh, the book and the movie are night and day. They are completely different. Nothing about this book is like the movie at all. There's no similarities except maybe some characters and the title. Nothing. They're nothing alike. And I may end up doing a book to movie comparison after I watch the movie again, but nothing alike. I didn't enjoy this. I don't necessarily recommend it. I Really love Cody Keplinger, and I'm not saying that I don't, but I'm gonna need to read the rest of her books to figure out where I truly stand. But anyway, like I said, I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars. Y'all let me know in the comments what you thought. As always, if you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content from me, make sure you click the subscribe button. As always, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.